She says, quoting them, and I think you referred to them, I mean, these are garbage stories.
Yeah, it was very frustrating.
And that they don't make any sense. At one point in time, she says it's Eduardo, and then another point in time, she says Quincy Brown's some type of paperwork fell out of his pants on that date, and that's how she knows he's Quincy Brown. I mean, none of this stuff, they were ridiculous.
Is that your?
I'm asking you, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and you heard me say it. They're garbage stories, is what you quoted me as saying.
And even on that, the first one, the one that we heard yesterday, on that phone call that she had yesterday, she's trying very hard to convince you that she didn't have anything to do when somebody had kidnapped Gannon and had taken him somewhere, and she's trying to help. It appears that is her goal, so what she's telling you.
Mr. Pleading, I'm not going to speak to her goals or her intent, what was going through her mind at that point.
She wasn't at that point in time trying to indicate anything mental health or anything like that. That was phone call. She's not telling you, hey, I'm crazy on the 13th, correct?
I don't believe she said that in any of those phone calls.
But in some of those phone calls, she does make some statements. And I'm going on to the February 13th phone call. She indicates at one point in time when she's talking to you, I have completely parts of the information and not part of the information.
Are you quoting that? Could you say that again?
She told you that she has part of the information, but she doesn't have part of the information.
Okay.
She talks to you about that night after night, I dreamed of different things that have added detail to this.
Okay.
She tells you that at some point she blacked out.
Are you quoting
Yes.
from? Okay, then I have no reason to deny her saying that. Yes.
At one point, she says, I sit back and remember it, like play it in my mind, play it in my head again, play it in my head again, play it in my head again.
Okay.
She says, when I woke up and like out of the state of confusion, I was going crazy.
Okay.
She tells you all of it was a blur in and out, try to figure it out. I got up at one point and hoped it was a dream.
Okay.
And then on that next phone call that occurred on the 14th, she's talking to you and she indicates you're going back and forth. I think it was the second to last phone call that you had with her. You guys are going kind of back and forth. And at one point, you're trying to figure out where Gannon is. She says, Tesha doesn't know where Gannon is.
I don't remember her saying that, but
Okay.
if you want to show me that, you don't have to, but I don't remember her saying that.
Okay. It's on the recording they have.
Okay.
As far as, and now I'm going to kind of shift to more like just general things of your relationship with Miss Stauch. You've indicated that at some point, and sometimes with her, it's like you're living on a roller coaster. She can be up and down.
Did I say that to someone?
Yeah. Again, this is a Detective Bethel. Sometimes you just got to kind of stay with her and don't ride the roller coaster. Or if you disagree with her, it becomes like a roller coaster.
Sure.
You talked about her with the kids, and you've indicated that, and this would be later in March, you did another interview and you did this with the FBI, March 6th, 2020. You remember doing an interview with the FBI then?
I did multiple interviews, so I might
Yeah.
need to see that one, Mr. Tellini.
Okay. You indicated to them that sometimes it was a little strange. Sometimes she could be really great with the kids, doing everything with them. And then you'd have weeks where she would act like she didn't want anything to do with them.
You mind if I take a look at that?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't remember that doing an interview that time frame.
I may approach. You may. Okay.
Hold on, this says February 9th. It says interview of Albert Stauch, February 9th. You indicated March 9th.
That's because the first page has a 3.
Okay.
So you're right. So February 9th, so that's my fault.
Thank you.
I think that was, I'm going to blame that on the FBI because on the first page of that interview, they have 3-9. But you're correct. So on
Can we
February,
clarify what the date actually is of the
it
interview?
is, you were correct. It's February
February.
9th. You did that interview with the FBI. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
But that point in time, you told them that some point she would be really great with the kids, and then other times she wouldn't want it. She wouldn't.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
You also, in that interview, I think it was that Monday with Detective Riley, same type of thing. Like 1 minute, considering these moments of trust moments, like right now, I say, you should be all in, helping the kids, teach, doing homework, cooking, feeding and stuff. And then there'd be days and week, like it's like the kids were left to fend for themselves.
What Monday are you referencing?
The Monday where you had, not the Monday, this would have been Tuesday, when you had the interview with Detective Riley back, so January 28th.
Okay. So this was the interview at
With
the
detec-
sheriff's office?
Yes, with Detective Riley.
Okay.
And you were telling him, describing how Ms. Stauch was with the kids, and you indicate that there are moments and times when she's really good, she's helping the kids, doing everything like that, and then other times where it appears like she's just checked out.
Yes, sir.
You indicated that sometimes her and Layden seemed to work together to try to get you.
Yeah, probably in jest, but
Okay.
yeah.
And then other times they appear to be at each other's throats.
Who's they?
Ms. Stauch and Layden.
Lena? If I said that.
Not Lena, Layden.
Landon?
Landon, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah,
Landon. I
okay,
apologize.
then I take back what I just said, yeah, can you start over with the
Okay.
Landon, because I thought you said Lena.
And yeah, Landon, with your first ex-wife, you indicated that sometimes her and Ms. Stauch would work together like they were out to try to get you, and other times they were at their throats constantly.
Yes, sir.
You indicated, and again, if I'm jumping back and forth, that Ms. Stauch would take lots of trips out of the blue and you didn't know where she got the money to do it.
Yes, sir.
You indicated when you talked to the district attorney's investigator that sometimes Ms. Stauch likes to refer to herself as Taylor.
Yes, sir.
She had, let me jump back a little bit and we're almost done, sir.
Take your time, Mr. Trellini.
Okay, thank you. When you guys first started, when you and Ms. Stauch first started dating and the relationship was going well, she had talked to you about the abuse she suffered growing up.
She mentioned that there was something with one of her stepfathers I think his name would have been Mr. Lowry, and I don't remember it being a pattern of abuse, but some isolated events is the way she described it to me, and she eventually moved out of that house and back with her grandparents in North Carolina.
Okay, and that was James Lowry. Do you remember?
I don't know his first name. I just remember the last name Lowry.
And I don't want to get into this, but that was kind of a bond that you got, not a bond, but that was you had in your family growing up. But I don't want to go into it, but not with you, but trauma growing up. And so that was something that a basis that you guys could talk about initially in the relationship.
We discussed it. I don't know if it's a foundational basis like you're describing it, but
She had issues maintaining steady employment.
I think that's a misrepresentation of what happened. But
Well, I mean, I think you indicated that she had like 8 jobs in 3 years.
right, and she intentionally left those jobs. It
Okay.
wasn't she had trouble keeping employment. She intentionally left those jobs.
Okay, but she had a lot of different jobs in a short period of time.
Yes, sir.
You're aware of in the late fall of 2019, she was having mental health issues.
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware that well, you guys have the same insurance, correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that she was seeing a Dr. Rhonda Niederhauser at Fort Carson?
We did. So let me clarify. We did have the same insurance while myself and the defendant were married. Obviously, no longer do. But yes, I went with her on one occasion to see Dr. Niederhauser. Well, to Fort Carson. I did not go back into the room with her. With the defendant, I stayed in the lobby, but I was with her on that visit.
And that and actually for most of your guys' relationship, she had been prescribed lorazepam.
I don't know for sure if most of our relationship. I know she at some point saw somebody for anxiety and got a prescription for something. That's all I remember, Mr. Tellini.
Are you aware that Dr. Niederhauser advised her to quit her job because her mental health issues were becoming so severe?
I am not aware of that.
Okay. But you are, to your knowledge, if you know, how often was she seeing Dr. Niederhauser?
Same answer I already gave. I know that she went once, and that was the one time that I went with her. That's all I can attest to, Mr. Tellini.
When you had, again, I'm jumping back to when you had that interview with Detective Riley. At that point in time, were you having concerns about Ms. Stauch and her involvement? When you had the interview with Detective Riley
And her involvement in what, Mr. Tellini?
in the disappearance of your son?
Yeah, we've already. Let's ask your question again, please, so I can.
When you interviewed with Detective Riley that first time, were you having concerns about her involvement?
So just to be clear, the first time by myself, or
First time by yourself?
yeah, I did have some concerns.
And you indicated that you don't think that she had any mental health issues?
I did indicate that I don't think she had any
Okay.
mental health issues.
Do you remember at that point in time telling Detective Riley, I hope that it doesn't come to that, but if you put her daughter on the hot seat, she'll say, I love my mom. You know, I wouldn't do anything without my mom, but she's freaking nuts, crazy.
So that was drawn. I remember saying that or something to that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you told the detective that she's crazy.
Mr. Tellini, would you quote what you just quoted to me?
Or you told the detective that Harley would say that her mom is freaking nuts, crazy.
That's what I said.
Okay. No further questions. Redirect, Mr. Allen.
There were some questions, Mr. Stauch, about the defendant being a good softball player. Do you remember those?
Yes, sir.
Does softball have rules?
Absolutely.
Did the defendant know how to follow those rules?
Absolutely.
Did she know how to play the game?
Very well.
Did she know how to use specific techniques and strategies in playing softball?
I would say her being a coach at the high school softball level would indicate all those things are yes.
You jumped to my next question.
Yeah.
Did she also go through efforts to teach other people how to play the
Absolutely.
follow the rules of softball?
Yes, sir.
Is that an indication that she knew the difference between right and wrong?
Yes, sir.
You were asked at the very beginning too about when you got custody of your kiddos, Gannon and Lena, that it was a safer environment with the defendant than with Landon. Do you remember those questions?
Yes, sir.
Would you have thought that if the defendant had severe mental health disease or defect?
Absolutely not.
Did she have a severe mental health disease or defect back then?
No, sir.
You were asked in different points of the cross-examination about your interviews with Detective Riley. And I want to be a little bit more of a timeline here. Do you remember having an interview with Detective Riley and other people at Starbucks, and that being your first contact with law enforcement in this case in person?
Yes, sir.
And then you went to the El Paso County Sheriff's Office to deliver, I think you said some stuff for DNA. What did you deliver?
I remember there being a toothbrush and maybe, I don't remember specifically, but some sort of article of clothing, a shoe or something that would have his, it wasn't spoken to me that way, but I assumed it was for DNA purposes.
And then I think you said that you had an interview at the end of that. When you dropped the stuff off, then you did an interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you remember what day that was?
That would have been Tuesday, January 28th, 2020.
The Starbucks thing, when did that occur? Was that also Tuesday, January?
Tuesday, earlier in the day.
Okay. And then you had a third interview in person at the sheriff's office when you came back. What day was that?
Later in the evening, Tuesday, January 28th, 2020.
You were asked about specifically shown a specific page of the interview, the first one at Starbucks, where Mr. Tellini was asking you about when you got Gannon into counseling.
Yes.
And there was some disagreement between you and Mr. Tellini about when that counseling may have started or when you said that the counseling had started. Who is Dr. Burtek?
She was I don't know specifically, but she was some sort of family health counselor that Gannon got assigned to at Fort Carson.
So could you have signed Gannon up for counseling at Fort Carson before you got to Colorado?
No, sir.
So did that occur after you got to Colorado,
Yes, sir.
which was in when?
I got here February 15th or thereabouts, 2019.
When you were having that first contact with Detective Riley at Starbucks, did you have a lot on your mind?
Absolutely.
The information that you had on your mind as it relates to Gannon being missing, where were you getting that information from that initial period of time?
Everything was coming from the defendant.
At that time, did you have any reason to necessarily disbelieve her that Gannon had left and not come home?
No, sir, not at that time.
And did that change over time?
Yes, sir.
Did that change over time because of the defendant's specific actions?
Yes, sir.
You were asked about you having conversations with your mother about, and Mr. Tellini said that your mother told you that she had concerns about the defendant's mental health.
That's what Mr. Tellini said, yes.
Do you remember that?
I don't remember her diagnosing the defendant based on hearsay. I remember having conversations about, the defendant's anxiety and how that affects our relationship. Yes.
In your mind, did the defendant have anxiety?
I'm not a medical professional, but I would say she had some form of it. She had, some anxiety here and there about different things.
Even if she had that anxiety in your lay opinion, was she able to function?
Absolutely.
Could she make a meal?
Absolutely.
Could she make a Denver omelet if she wanted to?
I maybe get some Chick-fil-A sandwiches, but yeah.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Could she scramble eggs?
She could, yes.
Put some cheese on the eggs
Yes, sir.
without burning herself?
Yes, sir.
What about cut up vegetables?
Yes, sir.
Could she do that without cutting herself?
Yes, sir.
Did she ever run out in the street yelling, screaming naked?
Not that I remember, no, sir.
You were asked about the rental car and about that being odd. Do you remember that in the cross-examination?
Yes, sir.
Did that appear to you in your mind to be a way of manipulating what was happening with the investigation?
That's hard for me to say. Once again, as you said already, that was a time period when I was just way down with worry. The reason she gave, I think we've talked about already, I'm not sure, but was about the mileage on her lease. And so she had to get a rental car, which was something the defendant had said repeatedly over time. So looking back, I can make an assessment, but in the moment, it was just a ridiculous thing that I just blew past. I was more worried about getting out there and doing what we could to find Gannon.
Well, if in your mind, if your kid is missing, are you worried about the miles you're putting on your car?
And I believe I've said that already. No, there's nothing more important than finding that little boy.
And so the fact that her car was hidden somewhere, was that when you put two and two together, was that a form in your mind of her manipulating the investigation?
Absolutely. That's why I freaked out and went back down to do another interview with the sheriff's office.
You were asked about the, again, going back to the Starbucks interview with Mark Riley, the first one on January 28th, about you expressing some concerns about Landon's ex-husband, Mike Hyatt. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
And talking about the trouble that he had in his background.
Yes, sir.
Again, at that time, were you operating on limited information?
Yes, sir.
Were you racking your brain trying to figure out what might have happened with Gannon?
Yes, sir. I was just going through every possible, any variable, anything possible that would have led us closer to him.
Would you characterize that as you were going through every known variable in your mind and then trying to cross them off to see whether there was any connection to Gannon being missing?
Yeah, in conjunction with variables and information that was being fed from the defendant as well.
Okay. You did 3 interviews on January 28th,
Yes, sir.
1 at Starbucks and then 2 at the sheriff's office later that day.
Yes, sir.
Did it seem odd to you that the defendant was resisting going to the sheriff's office and giving an interview?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Once again, if the feelings are true and honest about we need to work together and find Gannon, as the defendant said repeatedly, what is there to hide from? Why would you not go down there? What is keeping you, the defendant, from coming down there?
Okay. And did that appear in your mind to be a conscious decision the defendant was making to resist going to the sheriff's office and give an interview?
Absolutely.
You talked about getting text messages and phone calls during this time that these recorded phone calls were happening.
Yes, sir.
Did the defendant change I guess, the source of those phone calls over time? And let me be more clear. You obviously gave us earlier her specific phone number that you knew you had with her at AT&T.
Yes, sir.
Did you start getting phone calls and texts from her that weren't from necessarily AT&T, the account that you knew about?
Yes, sir. I got phone calls and text messages from multiple different phone numbers, and emails started coming from her email, which to me indicated it was no longer. I also got messages from her iCloud, is what I'm trying to say. So, which indicated to me she no longer had her normal phone and she was using some alternate method of communication, if that makes sense.
It does. And so, again, did that indicate to you more conscious decision making that she was still able to communicate with you, even though her phone might have been seized by law enforcement?
Yes, sir.
Able to navigate that sort of framework of figuring out other ways to text you or call you?
Yes, sir.
You were asked about these phone calls that we've heard in the stories that the defendant was giving you, and the way Mr. Tellini characterized them was that there was no consistency in the stories. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Were there in fact actually consistencies with her stories and what was happening with the investigation?
Yes, sir. For instance, once the search shifted to, say, northern El Paso, Douglas County area on that county line road area that the defendant indicated in the phone calls, I felt like she had to place herself there somehow, and that's what she did in that phone call.
Are you suggesting in your mind that that was a way for her to explain away why her GPS would show her there?
Yes, sir.
Objection, speculation. Sustained. Jury will disregard the answer.
She also gave you a description of blood being in the garage and in Gannon's room.
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that there was blood found in the garage and in his bedroom?
Yes, sir.
And then as it relates to that El Paso County, Douglas County lines up north, were you aware that there was a board with Gannon's blood and DNA found on it up in that area?
I was made aware of that. Yes, sir.
You got into some questions about your relationship with the defendant, and you were specifically asked about a statement you made about the relationship between the two of you was like riding a roller coaster. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Why was it like riding a roller coaster?
I think that's the normal ebb and flow of we had our ups and downs in our relationship. That's what that indicated.
Well, let me ask you more specifically, based on your belief that she would manipulate you sometimes, did that add to the effect of riding a roller coaster
Yeah, that would have been the extreme lows in our relationship. Yes, sir.
when she would manipulate you?
Yes, sir.
Was it common for her to manipulate you?
Yes, sir.
You were asked about sometimes she would be great and sometimes not. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
When the sometimes not period of time, what was that a result of?
Oftentimes a result of that manipulation that we just discussed, or lies or mistruths the defendant would tell that I would have to sort through, as you heard me do in these phone calls, that I have to sort through these lies and get to the truth.
Was it ever those lows, the sometimes not part, were those ever a result of her suffering from a severe mental illness or disease?
No, sir.
Ever?
No, sir.
You were asked about the defendant referring to herself as Taylor. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury about that. What does that mean?
So I believe when I met the defendant, her Facebook profile said Tisha Taylor Harden. And of course, I had questions about that because her middle name is Lynn, I believe, the defendant's middle name. The defendant would always say, I always wanted my middle name to be Taylor. I don't like the name Lynn. And that's where I left it at that. So anytime Taylor ever came up, I just, in my mind, referred back to that's what she preferred her name to be.
Well, did she ever use the name Taylor and start acting crazy?
No, sir.
Did she ever use the name Taylor and start talking in other languages?
No, sir.
Did she ever use the name Taylor and start having other personalities?
No, sir.
Was Taylor ever associated with her having a severe mental illness or disease or defect?
No, sir.
You were asked about the defendant having difficulty maintaining steady employment. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
You answered that the defendant intentionally left those jobs.
Yes, sir.
So expand on that for the jury. What do you mean by that?
So, for instance, when we, I think in the tail end of our dating relationship, in the first part of our married relationship, she was working at Myrtle Beach Middle or Elementary School and quit, resigned from that position, causing her to have to seek new employment.
Okay.
And and why that's significant, because I disagreed with the decision. It was what I, outside looking in, a great place of employment for her, and she seemed fine there.
Okay. And then you were asked about Dr. Niederhauser, right? Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Tellini told you that the defendant was being seen for anxiety. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
Did you know whether she was being seen for anxiety or not?